Welcome back to another episode of Don't Waste the Chaos. I'm your host, Kerri Roberts, and I am recording this episode. It's the first full week in the new year. I know it's probably coming out later in January, but if you're listening to this and it's still January, or whenever you're listening to this in the year, we always need a refresh and a restart. And ironically, when I was thinking about this episode and what I wanted to talk about, I kept thinking about releasing the weight. And this isn't going to be an episode on health, even though we will talk about mental health. And I do think it's important that you live at a healthy weight for your body. And especially as I age, I've noticed, losing weight helps my joints and all kinds of issues, but we're not talking about physical weight this week on the podcast. We're talking about the weight that leaders carry, the mental burden, the emotional burden. Leaders are carrying more than ever based off of what I've been reading and honestly what I have felt personally over the past 20 years. I'm talking burnout, legacy habits that we're tied to and we can't seem to get away from, decision fatigue, and the myth that carrying it all is leadership. This episode is going to reframe leadership maturity as release and clarity, not as addition of new things. If leaders don't stop carrying what costs them, their people, their performance, and honestly, their soul, they risk a mass leadership exodus and weakened organizations. I've talked in previous episodes about middle manager burnout. This is mid-manager, senior level. I'm covering all levels of leadership here. And just releasing the weight. I want this to be a leadership reset for the year. So you feel it every day. We all do. We've all got too many demands and not enough time and a heavy expectation to hold it all together. I read this statistic the other day that over 56% of leaders are reporting burnout, and it's rising year over year. It's risen year over year for the last 6 years. And we're just not plateauing. There's more going on always. And it wasn't always like this. We didn't always see levels of burnout. And you could say, well, we've brought awareness to it. And so now there's more thought around it. And that's possibly true. It's just like the Me Too movement. When you bring awareness to it, now everyone's been sexually harassed and we've all got something that we can report on or talk about. And I get it. Burnout might be the same thing. It's kind of like people talking about trauma and saying that everything that is inconvenient in their life is a trauma. So I understand we might be stretching this a little bit here. But based on the experience that I had in the workplace and then what I see my clients handle, I don't think this stat is off. 56% of leaders reporting burnout, and it's rising year over year. Today is not about adding another leadership hack, even though I've got a few suggestions that I can make. It's about letting go of what's costing you clarity, what's costing your influence, and what's costing your fulfillment in your work. I just know that so many leaders carry burnout as a badge of honor. And when I look back at when I was a COO and a senior leader, I can remember, or a VP or even an HR director saying things. And I'm not even going to say I thought they were funny. I think I was trying to get a point across and I was hurting, but I would say things like, I just work all the time, or, if you love your job, you're always on, you're always working. Oh, I worked 80 hours this week. And it wasn't a lie, but I would bring that stuff up. And now that I'm looking back, I don't think I was bringing it up because I thought it was funny. I was bringing it up because I either wanted credit for it. I wanted to establish credibility that I was a person who would get it all done. What I was really establishing credibility for is that I was a workaholic and really distracted in my marriage and really distracted as a mother. But I obviously was needing something. I was needing affirmation that I was important. I was needing affirmation that my life was important, that I was in demand, that what I was working on was complex. I needed that. There was a really long season in my life where I would mistake exhaustion for commitment. And then I would want others to see that in me too. I saw this stat that leaders are 2.5 times more likely to leave their company due to burnout than any other role. So entry-level roles in the organization. Burnout isn't resilience. It's a red flag. And those times when I would say those flippant comments like, I've got to leave the country to take a vacation. I can remember my husband and I used to take at least one vacation a month. And I mean, you might be listening and be like, well, it must be nice that you were able to travel. I mean, everybody has a different debt threshold and you get done what you want to get done. But for me, I was so overtasked in my business. And then I also had this huge home and all of these other obligations that I had signed myself up for, whether it was serving on boards of directors for nonprofits or doing advisory work or participating in my kids' school or coaching or all of these things. I needed to be needed so bad. And if you're listening to this and you're like, no, that's just all really fulfilling, I'm going to challenge your thought process. We are finite people. We can't do it all. And when we act like we can do it all, something's off. Something's off there. It's not because we are that important. It's really not. We are needing some kind of affirmation in our life. And that's the reason why we are overdoing it in all of these areas. We were created to need rest, and putting that to the back burner isn't a badge of honor. It's really sinful, in my opinion. If burnout were a company KPI, we would have already laid ourselves off. We must stop equating being busy with being effective, which is what I thought for so long, that I was just really effective, that I was just a high capacity person. And I am. I am really effective. And I do have a ton of capacity for work. I love work. It's fulfilling. But being busy does not equal being effective. So I want you to consider, and this is something that I've had to consider over the years, that I was the answer to everything. And my goal is to stop being the answer and to start being the question. Decision fatigue and carrying every choice cost strategic clarity. And even when I started my consulting firm almost 3 years ago, I was the answer for my clients when it came to HR. And I'm trying to back away from that. I don't want them to come to me every single minute with their HR needs. I want to equip them, just like as a leader, we need to be equipping our employees to answer their own questions and to be empowered to do their own work. Leaders report decision fatigue as a major burnout driver. And I read some statistics that we've essentially exhausted all of our decision-making abilities, our good decision-making abilities, by like noon. And then we keep working and working and working into the evening hours. And then we're not even making great decisions because we've got decision fatigue. And part of the reason why we have decision fatigue is because we put ourselves on this pedestal as a leader, as the person that's the go-to. And you might not even be intentionally doing that. You might be thinking like, I don't want to be the go-to. I've just somehow created that. Well, now's the time to get away from that. Jesus chose questions that shifted perspective, like, who do you say I am? He invited leaders, just like we need to invite our leaders today, to ask better questions, to not hold all of the answers. True leadership isn't about having all of the answers. It's creating space where the right questions can drive action. That's something that I'm working on with my clients. I'd encourage you, if you're inside of an organization, to start working on this with your employees, because they can do it alone. They don't need you. That's the truth. And, you might look at it in a dark way and say everyone's replaceable, but the reality of it is we all are. Earlier, I guess in 2025, my husband had a pulmonary embolism, and it was really scary. We really focus on our health, always have, but we've really accelerated that in the last 3 years. So it was pretty wild to us that he had a major health issue. And while he was in the hospital, I also had the flu, and I was hiding the flu because I wanted to be with him. It was dangerous. With those first 7 days were really touch and go. We didn't know if he was going to make it. And so everything shut down. And this was at the end of January. So here we've kicked off a new year. I'm running my own business. He's a mortgage broker, has his own firm, and we are doing the thing. Like, we're busting it. It's the start of a new year. We're both very driven. And this happens. Completely took us both out. Even though I was sick, I could have managed through that. But he was essentially on his deathbed at the time. And I just laid on the hospital bed. I moved everything off my calendar with the exception of one business call. And it was a prospecting call with a client I really, really wanted. And even then my mind was everywhere. I should have just pushed it. I ended up landing the client, but he would have totally understood. He actually works in the funeral home business. And so he sees death all of the time and understands how important life is. But anyway, I digress. Everything shut down. And when I look at how I closed the books on 2025, that blip in time where I prioritized my personal life over my business did not negatively impact my business in a long-term way. It didn't. It did positively impact my marriage. It did positively impact my health because we've made even further shifts into how we're focusing on our emotional, physical, and mental well-being. But it didn't negatively hurt my business. And right now, if you got a horrible cancer diagnosis, what's going on at work should slow down. In 2019, the crazy thing, I had an ablation, and that this is personal information, but I had an ablation. This is a female procedure. It wasn't a heart procedure. And while I was out, my OBGYN said, "Hey, why don't you get a mammogram while you're out?" I was 37 and I was like, don't you start getting those when you're 40? And she said, "Well, your insurance will cover it. So why don't you just go ahead and get it? I know how you are. It's hard to get you to stop working. So while you're out for the ablation, why don't you just get a mammogram one of the days where you're off work?" And so I was like, geez, Louise. Okay. So the day after my ablation, I'm supposed to be taking it easy at home, and I go in for a mammogram, and I'll give you the short Cliff's Notes version. That day, they called me back and said I needed to do an ultrasound. And directly after the ultrasound, they scheduled me with a surgeon. And I got into the surgeon within a couple of days, and the surgeon did some further testing. We did an MRI. And long story short, she was like, "Hey, you need to get a lumpectomy, and we need to get this out of there. You're 37 years old. And it's dangerous for anybody," but they treated it very aggressively. I hardly told anyone what was going on. And I remember going into work, and we called like an all hands meeting. Everybody came into the boardroom, and I said, "I'm going to be having a lumpectomy. I've got what they diagnosed me with was stage 0 cancer, which I hadn't heard of, but essentially the cells were clustering and forming cancer, but wasn't further staged. Caught it really early." And so I let everybody know. And there were a few women in the room that just burst into tears. One of them was a cancer survivor herself. A few other ones were individuals who were close to me. And I looked at them and I thought at that moment, this is why I didn't want to tell anyone. What I thought was because I don't want to deal with their emotions, but what the reality of it was is because I wasn't dealing with my own emotions. I wasn't pausing. And so because of that, I wasn't capable of handling anyone else's emotions. But in my mind, I thought, I don't want to deal with it because I don't have time for this. I just wanted to go have the surgery and heal. And that's what I did. But similar to when I had my baby and was working from my phone the next day, I thought that I was so important that I couldn't take a beat. And that's probably the reason why I had a few different health issues and why I struggled with stress and anxiety and a number of other things. And if you've listened to some of my podcast episodes, I run a sponsor role for Magic Mind, and that's I quit guzzling caffeine because I was having panic attacks. The caffeine was just an exacerbator. The problem was I wasn't balancing myself, and I had major, major burnout. And while one particular role was very, very triggering to me and really hard, I had been building this for years. I had been building these bad habits. I had been building this sense of self all wrapped up in my work. I had been building burnout for years and years and years. And when I finally broke, I felt betrayed. I felt so hurt. I felt so broken. And that's because I had overexerted myself into this company. And in doing so, when things got really hard, the first thing I thought was, I gave everything for these people and they're treating me really poorly. And the truth is, I had given everything and I shouldn't have. They hadn't even asked me for that. And you might think, well, my company does expect that out of me. Do they? Or are you putting that on yourself? I can say with clarity, I was putting it on myself. They didn't treat me perfectly. They were flawed people, but I was putting it on myself. And I want to get to where, and I'm working to get to a place where I'm not the one that holds all the answers, but I am the one that holds the really good questions. I want to be a stimulating individual that helps other people see. True leadership isn't having all of the answers. It's creating space where the right questions can drive actions. So I want to encourage you to stop holding work that you shouldn't. Delegation is a leadership discipline that we all need to work on. I saw a stat at the PR Newswire article that was only 19% of rising leaders demonstrate effective delegation. That's the skill most linked to preventing burnout. And only 19% of leaders are demonstrating this. And that's because it's not modeled for them at the senior leader level. So many of us at the senior leader level or the executive level aren't modeling this well. So rising leaders feel like they can't model it well. Holding every task doesn't make you indispensable. It really makes you replaceable, in my opinion. You've become the go-to person, and we've always said we want to be the go-to person, but that means we're not really modeling good leadership for others. Intentional delegation is a spiritual and a strategic yield, freeing your leadership to do what matters most, not holding on to every tick-tacky assignment, every tactical duty that you need to have. And I've got a client right now that is feeling held hostage by one of his employees. And we're ultimately going to separate this employee. And I'm not saying that to scare you. It's just when I took a look into his organization, one of the biggest risk areas was that this one employee did so much of the heavy lifting in a very complex area and wouldn't speak to other employees. She wouldn't even communicate with other employees, wouldn't even answer questions, wouldn't write standard operating procedures, wouldn't write work instructions, wouldn't document anything. She's holding them hostage. Now, I know that this comes because I'm a human that has grace. This comes because she's fear-based. Maybe she doesn't know her worth. There's a number of different psychological things that I could guess, but I shouldn't psychoanalyze her. The reality of it is, from a business perspective, it's a major risk and we have to fix it. And what we did was we approached her and said, hey, we want you to document all of your processes. She got more combative, sat down with her and essentially said, you must speak to your colleagues. This is part of being a team player. Not doing it caused more issues. Ultimately, we've got to let her go. She's holding on to all of these things when she really could be a leader in this organization, not because she's a go-to person, because no one else understands her job or knows how to do her job, but because people value her vast experience. If she would delegate to some other people, it's a spiritual and strategic yield. So let's kind of pivot a little bit here, because I just said that, sometimes you have to separate a person, but here's the problem. If a person doesn't know their own worth or trust themselves or see the value in themselves beyond their work, they feel replaceable. Then as a leadership team, if we're treating them as replaceable, then they're going to hold on even tighter, right? So how, as a leader, can we stop treating people as replaceable, but make sure that the work is able to get done regardless? And this is where a leadership culture really, really matters. Leadership stress, when unaddressed, erodes engagement and threatens leadership pipelines. If you are a burnt out, maxed out leader, I can almost guarantee you, based on the data that I've seen, I can guarantee you to a degree, that the people underneath you are not dying to be you anymore. I can remember when I was younger, I was dying to be the HBIC, right? If you don't know what that means, it's the head biatch in charge. I had to be it. There was no other option for me. I wanted to be, it's the equivalent of the big man on campus, right? BMOC. Like, we're all trying to be it, or at least we used to. We used to be looking at the leader or the ladder and we're clawing our way up it. I was like, I got to be on top. And part of that is God gave me some really clear leadership skills and abilities, and I want to use those. And that's a righteous desire. But then when taking it and saying, I have got to be the person in charge and I will claw and fight my way to the top, and then I'll be fear-based because of the way that I got my way to the top. I'll be fear-based and I want to hold on to everything. I don't want to delegate. That's not something that I really struggle with. I did want to rise up leaders, but so many of us do have either fear-based leadership, or we tie so much of our identity to who we are and what our job title is that we won't delegate. And this erodes engagement of our employees, and it threatens the leadership pipeline, because we used to say, what's the saying? They hate us because they ain't us. Now they're like, y'all are sick. You're exhausted. You're a crappy mom. You're a crappy spouse. You don't have balance in your life. The younger generation wants balance. They want a personal life. They want work to provide the money that they need and want to fuel their personal life. It's healthier than I've ever seen it. But what it's doing is eroding leadership pipelines, because people don't want to be in this unhealthy, wobbly wheel place that most executives are. Workers overwhelmingly want healthy boundaries and mental well-being support. The American Psychological Association put out a ton of reports on this recently, and I was reading through, and it's just the desires are different and they're better. They're healthier. We lead people, not outputs. Stewardship of human beings begins with presence, not pressure. So if you want engagement from your people, stop leading like tasks matter more than the people do. And that's something that we're all guilty of. We just want the outcomes. We just want people to get their paycheck and do their work. But the reality of it is that they're people, and we have to be present with them, not pressuring of them. We have to show them that we care. We have to be in the work with them, but not so upside down that they don't want to be us. So here are some key leadership reset decisions that I want to challenge you with. There's 4 of them. Stop wearing exhaustion as a proof of commitment and replace that with rhythms that protect clarity. One of the things that I did for 2026, and I've done this a little bit more and better every year, especially these last 3 years that I've been in business for myself. But when I was in corporate, I would schedule these to my time off, my big vacations, but it was to escape. It really was to escape. And I'm looking at it in a different way. And it's not just because I'm trying to look at it a different way. It is truly different in my life because of the way I've developed things. But this year in particular, I went into my calendar, and I ought to just share my screen with you, but I went into my calendar and I'm just going to run through it. I devised my days every single day nearly the same way. And it's the first time I've ever done this. And I've done time blocking in the past, but I've done it to fit in all of my work, not to fit in all of my personal life and then make work really work within my schedule. So from 6:30 to 8 a.m., I have a time block that's waking up, do a house reset, get my kid out the door if it's a weekday, and do my skincare. So I block off an hour and a half from 6:30 to 8, because I wake up at varying, Monday through Friday, I wake up at 6:30 to get my kid out the door. Then on the weekends, not as early, but usually by 8. But I'm doing my morning rhythms. And by 8 a.m., I want to be sitting in my cozy chair with my cozy blanket, doing my devotional and doing some journaling. And what I've done in the past is kind of, got on my phone and got distracted. Sometimes I'll take a walk. Sometimes I won't. Sometimes I'll start organizing something. So what I've done is this time blocking to keep me focused and to make sure that I'm getting everything done that I actually want to get done. So I'm resetting my house, meaning starting a load of laundry, maybe putting away any dishes on the countertop, maybe cleaning out some stuff out of the fridge, whatever it is. And then my skincare. And then at 8 a.m., I'm sitting down in my chair and I'm doing my devotional and I'm journaling. And I'm doing that. I blocked out 45 minutes for that. And I know that's a pretty decent chunk of time, but I want to give myself the time, not just to read my devotional, but I'm a person of faith if you haven't caught that yet, but I also want to go back and reference different scripture that my devotional references, and I want to journal about it. I don't want to just read and check a box. I want to think and I want to reflect. I love the way that feels in my brain. I love being in my brain. That's the way that my personality works. And if I'm just sitting there and reading for 5 minutes and checking the box, or I'm doing 75 hard and I've got to read my 10 pages and then I move on, sure, that's meeting some goals. Depends on what your goals are. But for me, I want to think about what I just read and I want to apply it in my life. So I've got 45 minutes blocked out for that. At 9 a.m., I've got 30 minutes blocked out for movement. This morning, I ran over to our gym. It's inside of our pool house, and I did some free lift weights. And all I did was throw this schedule into AI and said, I want to lift for 20 to 30 minutes every day. Can you give me 2 to 3 different workouts to rotate? I've got free weights. I've got this, I've got a rower. I've got an assault bike. I've got, Rogue machine and equipment, all of this stuff. What should I do? It spit out some workouts. I'm doing those. I eliminate the thinking. Some mornings I do a 20 to 30 minute yoga with Adrienne on YouTube, those type of things, but I'm moving for 30 minutes and I come in at 9:30. I'm having breakfast. A good breakfast. This morning I had oatmeal with pecans. It's loaded with collagen. I order it off of Thrive Market. I'll make sure that I use that sponsor roll today, but a delicious, wholesome breakfast, either with protein or carbs or both to fuel myself. 10 a.m., I'm sitting down in my office. Used to be 9 a.m., used to be 8 a.m., 10 a.m., I'm sitting down in my office and I'm working on client advisory work and strategy. I'm not opening up my email and getting caught up in admin work. I have admin scheduled for a certain block. What I realized was if you sit down, and we all know this, we can get bogged down in our email and not really accomplish anything real. It's just all admin work. And so what I'd rather do is accomplish my project work, my deep thinking work for my clients, what they pay me for. And then the admin work, if it doesn't get done, I'll do more tomorrow. I'll do more the next day. I'll do more the next day. So I've got a solid 2-hour block for client advisory work and strategy work. On Mondays, I'm doing my podcast recording and then submitting the episode. But other days, I have a block that's for piano. I play the piano. I want to play it more, for reading, for writing, for art, creative block. So from noon to 1, I've got this solid creative block, whether it's my podcast or otherwise. And then right after that, I'm having a nice light lunch and a walk every day. Then I come back into my office and I'm back to client calls, strategy work, advisory work. And then after that, I'm doing my admin tasks. And then I move into mom mode and I don't come back into my office. This is how I have my calendar set up. And I've got to tell you, I'm so excited about it. I'm replacing all of this exhaustion, all of this overcommitment with rhythms that protect my clarity. What I bring to my clients, just this morning, what I was able to sit down and bang out for one of my clients was amazing in that focused work. I didn't sit down and start scrolling through my email and then, schedule some stuff with clients and then reschedule this other thing and then answer this tic-tacky question. That's not what I'm doing. And I'm so excited for this shift. I am more productive in my business than I've ever been, bringing more value than I ever have, and with more balance than I ever have. Stop wearing exhaustion as a proof of commitment. What can you do in your calendar right now to help shift that? And I would recommend using AI as a tool for things like this. Say, here are the things that matter to me. Here are my commitments. Here's what my personal commitments are. Here's what my health goals are. Here's what I'm trying to accomplish in my business. Here's the most important thing in my business. Here's what moves the needle most in my business. And then let AI start to put a calendar together. And the first blush, it's not going to work, but you have to manipulate it, work through it, ask it to ask you questions. AI models this really well. You tell AI, what questions should you be asking me to help me think through this? And it'll ask you some really great thought-provoking questions. AI models that super well. So we are going to, the first key leadership reset decision is stop wearing exhaustion as a proof of commitment. We are committed people with balanced calendars. That doesn't mean that we have to be exhausted to prove it. Second thing we're going to do is stop shouldering every single decision. Where can we automate? Where can we delegate? Replace with frameworks that build shared discernment. So whether you've got employees that work with and for you that you can delegate to, think about your repeatable tasks and things that other people can do for you. Take your calendar, throw it into AI and say, what are my repeatable tasks? Where can I automate? The guys that founded Zapier are from Colombia, which is the town I just lived in for the last over 20 years. And that's a great tool. There's a ton of tools out there, whether you create a Zap or otherwise. Ask AI to help you automate your tools and how to do it. The third is stop leading by doing. I want to stop doing so dang much. Replace with leading by enabling others, leading by utilizing technology, leading by utilizing frameworks through delegation, but you don't have to do all day long. If you're an entry-level employee listening to this, yeah, Put your time in. You've got to learn how to do it all first. But good grief, I've been doing HR for over 20 years. I don't have to go do it to prove that I know what I'm doing. I need to help others. I need to lead by enabling others. And then the fourth thing, stop risking people for productivity. Whether it's yourself, your family, or employees, replace with cultures, either inside of the home or outside of the home, that connect, that trust, and that empower. The other night, my husband walked into my office. It was like 5:23. It was dark out. It's Missouri in January. And I said, "What are you thinking about for dinner?" And he said, "Whatever you want to make." And the funny thing is, my very first thought was like, okay, well, how about whatever you want to make, like, because we share responsibilities in the kitchen. But then I thought, Kerri, it's 5:23. You're still in your office that you said you weren't going to be. Cooking is actually life-giving for you. You enjoy that. Get your butt up and go to the kitchen and think about what you want. It's fun for me. It isn't fun when I don't allocate the right amount of time to it. It isn't fun when I'm rushed. It isn't fun when I don't give myself time to think and pre-plan and prep and lay meat out to thaw or whatever it is. That's not fun. But it is fun when I allocate the right amount of time and the right amount of preparation and the right amount of brain space. I like cooking. Maybe you don't. That's fine. Maybe you want to do meal prep. Maybe you want to use Factor Meals or whatever it is you want. I'm not sponsored by them, but whatever meals that you want to use. Maybe your spouse does that. Maybe you use a restaurant, maybe whatever it is that works for you, but whatever it is needs to be intentional or you're not going to hit your health goals either. And if you're not hitting your health goals, then you're not hitting your business productivity goals, because a healthy body helps with a healthy mind. So we want to replace the culture in our home and in our business with one of connection, with one of trust, and with one of empowerment. When I'm rushing into the kitchen and throwing things around, yeah, I'm pissy at my husband. But he didn't think about it, and neither did I. That's not just his fault, it's mine too. I want to empower myself and him to make good decisions in the kitchen, the same way that we can make good decisions in our workplace. When we are maxed out and then behind on a deadline, it's easy to get short with our employees. But did we take a look at did we set the deadline appropriately? And then did we schedule out time to work on that? Or are we waiting to the last minute? And I thrive under stress. I thrive under a tight deadline, and I get that, but my team doesn't. And I don't need to do that to everyone else. And not to mention, when I'm doing that in all areas of my life, the wheels fall off, because that means that I'm not making time for working out. That means I'm not making time to hang out with my kiddo. I'm just exhausted. I can't think of another thing. And so we want to care about connection, trust, and empowerment. So if you're sensing this tension in your organization, I help leaders design cultures where clarity trumps chaos, whether that's through coaching or tailored speaking engagements. And for teams feeling this leadership overload, I would help you move from overwhelmed to aligned, particularly in companies navigating growth or reset moments. And if your team needs framework and not slogans, let's talk about how a leadership reset experience for your organization can move the needle. So if this leadership reset resonates with you, I release HR in a Box spots at the beginning of the year. I opened up 15 of those. And so let's make 2026 a year that you can lead with less weight and more impact. Let go of some of it. When I'm talking about delegation, who's doing your HR? Who's responsible for your people? If you're responsible for everything, I'm talking about, when I'm talking about HR, so many of us don't know what that is. Whether I'm talking about determining what roles need to be added into your organization, to posting those roles, to interviewing for those roles, hiring those roles, onboarding those roles, and then determining what the milestones or the KPIs are for those roles, how they're going to be performance managed, to performance reviews, to disciplinary action, to time and labor management, all of the laws that go into human resources. Who is managing all of that? And also on top of that, knowing whose birthday is when and how we're celebrating milestone anniversaries, and who's celebrating and when, whose life is hard and who needs to be turning the throttle up and then who needs to be hitting the brakes in their life. If you're managing all of that, let's make 2026 a year where you lead with less weight and more impact. Let's delegate, whether that's to me or somebody else. So here are some questions I want you to sit with as we close. What's one thing that you are carrying that your company or your spouse or your kid or God never asked you to hold? And how might releasing that unlock better leadership. Clarity grows in the space where we stop carrying what is stealing our clarity. So I would love to connect with you further on this. If any of this prompted something, I'd love it if you would forward this episode to someone who might be struggling with the same thing. And you're always welcome to reach out to me at hi@saltandlightadvisors.com to connect, or go to saltandlightadvisors.com/contact to get in touch with me. I want to help you with your decision-making clarity, identity, people strategy, and practical leadership renewal. 2026 is my year and it's your year. Let's do it. Let's get in here and let's do this together. I know that leading others on a team can feel like chaos. I know that managing everything in a day, I have to pivot my calendar. I have to reevaluate. I know that you do too. I know that life can feel like chaos, but the work is worth it. So don't waste the chaos, friend. Embrace it. Until next time.